Hello, everyone, as you're entering the room. Welcome. Thanks for making the time to join us this evening. My name is Michael. I'm the events coordinator and publicist at Annie Bloom's Books. For those of you who aren't familiar with the store, we're located in Multnomah Village, which is in Portland, Oregon. We've been around for 42 years now, and we are still going strong. Our store is now open for in-store browsing. Masks are still required. We're open on weekdays from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and weekends from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Our website is always open, annieblooms.com. You can shop there day or night. We offer curbside pickup, in-store pickup now, local delivery, and a couple of different shipping options. We encourage you to buy both of these authors' books tonight and get them in one of those fashions. We have a few events coming up in the near future. I'm going to tell you about Tuesday, June 15th, Portland author Cindy Baldwin will be joining us for the live stream launch of her new middle grade novel, The Stars of Whistling Ridge. She'll be in conversation with Jamie Pacton, another middle grade author whose book is Lucky Girl. On Thursday, June 17th at 4 p.m., we have Megan Galbraith, who will be in conversation with Portland author Liz Prado, who is in the room with us tonight. And 2 hours later on that same evening, we're gonna have Joshua Henkin for his new novel, Morningside Heights. He'll be in conversation with Tom Barbash, author of The Dakota Winter is another novel. Tonight, we are delighted to be hosting Australian author Donna Ward for the US live stream launch of her memoir, She I Dare Not Name, A Spinster's Meditation on Life. She is joined this evening by Portland author Jackie Shannon Hollis, whose memoir is This Particular Happiness, A Childless Love Story. After their conversation and readings, there's going to be a Q&A session. Feel free to type into the chat there and I'll read those questions to them, or you can come on screen during the Q&A and ask in person, as it were. So let me tell you about these books. She I Dare Not Name, astonishing, luminous, a book about being human. She I Dare Not Name is a compelling collection of fiercely intelligent, deeply intimate, lyrical reflections on the life of a woman who stands on the threshold between two millennia. Both manifesto and confession, this moving memoir explores the meaning and purpose Donna Ward discovered in a life lived entirely without a partner and children. The book describes what it is like to live on the edge of a world built in the shape of couples and families. Rippling through these pages is the way a spinster, or a bachelor, or any of us for that matter, contends with the prejudice and stigma of being different. With courage and astounding honesty, Donna uncovers the challenge of living with more solitude than anticipated and what it is like to walk the road through midlife and beyond alone. And she reveals how she found home and discovered herself within it. Funny, sharp, wise, and wry, She I Dare Not Name shows how reading saved this spinster's life, and how friends and writing and walking brought a contentment and sense of achievement she never thought possible. Donna Ward established the micro press Inkerman and Blunt and Indigo, Journal of Western Australian Creative Writing. She has past lives as a psychotherapist and a social worker in welfare management and social policy development. These days, she considers herself a writer and tinkers around helping out at Alice's Bookshop, a hive of antiquarian and secondhand books. Her prose has appeared nationally and internationally, including in the Griffith Review, Fish Anthology in Ireland, Huffington Post, and she's a contributor to the online newspaper, The New Daily. Let me tell you about Jackie's book, This Particular Happiness. Knowing where your scars come from doesn't make them go away. When Jackie Shannon Hollis marries Bill, a man who does not want children, she joyfully commits to a childless life. But soon after the wedding, she returns to the family ranch in rural Oregon and holds her newborn niece. Jackie falls deep into baby love and longing and begins to question her decision. As she navigates the overlapping roles of wife, daughter, aunt, sister, survivor, counselor, and friend, she explores what it really means to choose a different path. This Particular Happiness delves into the messy and beautiful territory of what we keep and what we abandon to make space for love. Jackie Shannon Hollis is a lifelong Oregonian. She resides with her husband in a home her friends call the treehouse. Her education and work as a counselor pushed her to hold up the mirror to her own self. In addition to thinking she would be a mother, she once dreamed of being a June Taylor dancer and a race car driver. All right, so welcome, Donna and Jackie.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to kick things off here. And first off, just really want to thank Annie Blooms and Michael in particular for helping us get this to happen and working with Donna from Australia and kind of coordinating all of this. So I just really appreciate that. And I appreciate all of you. I know how Zoom burnout can happen, and I'm just really glad that you all joined us this evening. I want to just talk a little bit about how I got to know Donna and found out about her book. We're both connected to Jody Day, who is someone who has started a group called Gateway Women, which she wrote the foreword for my book. And she does a number of things for people who are childless, not by choice. And has had quite a large community in that. And she created a group called we're called the No Mo Crones. It's women over 50, I believe. Is that right, Donna?
I think so, yeah.
At each solstice, we do a chat together around different topics that have to do with being older and without children, a variety of circumstances that have brought people to that. I just want to give a little shout out to a couple people here. Lenora Fay is on this group, and she runs the Child Free Girls, is one of the 3 Child Free Girls podcasts. It's really fabulous. And my publisher, Laura Stanfill, is also here, who I haven't gotten to see for a while, so I'm quite tickled. Donna's book, I want to just show you my experience of reading it, all these areas. And I have really struggled a little bit with how to talk about it, because there's so much in it. And there are things for me that overlap with my own story that I would read it and I would be like, oh, Egypt shows up in here. And there are just a number of things where we cross paths. The importance of place is quite significant in Donna's book. So there was that, but there was also the differences where my book is very much focused on my own story. Donna's expands out of that, like some other, I think of Liz Prado's essay collections that go from the personal to the societal, and the ability to do that and to take this big picture world and then also bring it to the personal is something I really admire a lot. So to just say a couple things at the top, and then I'm going to ask Donna to read a little bit, and then because I mostly want to dig into some conversation here. One of the things that I was quite struck by is my own story is about being childless, not by choice, but also child-free, because I sort of moved back and forth between those experiences. But what Donna brings is a whole other kind of story, which is about being, I'm going to just say this in a way, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but being alone, not by choice. And I want to talk later about choice in that, because I think it's interesting to explore that. So I would like to start with having you read, Donna, just from the opening, that little section we talked about, and just to give you a sense of Donna's book and her beautiful writing, scene setting.
So just before I do, I want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you today from the Wurundjeri country of the Kulin Nation, of our First Nations people. And I'd like to pay respect to our elders, past, present and emerging, and say yet again that this land has not yet been ceded. Although I am very proud to say that in Victoria, where I live, we are in negotiation, treaty negotiations with our people. That just makes me feel very emotional to be part of that. Anyhow, I'll just breathe in and read the opening pages of my book. So this is a piece called Winter's Road. It's a collection of hybrid essays, if you like, or it's a hybrid memoir. And I've written essays that draw on my personal life to highlight particular experiences and issues of being a spinster. This is called Winter's Road. And it opens with a quote from Henry David Thoreau, which you'll be familiar with. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of my life and see if I could not return, if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. It is an ice split of a winter, 1992, a Sunday afternoon in the middle of it. I'm in Brunswick Street, Fitzroy, Melbourne. I'm with friends. The sun shines obliquely through the windows of the Turquoise Cafe. Clustered around wooden tables, we sit on roughly painted old school chairs, red, blue, green. My friends and I laugh, drink coffee. I order a cappuccino and an escargot. Some of us have whiskey to keep the cold from our veins. We meet here on Sundays. We have been meeting here for years. It's so good to be in company. I haven't spoken since Friday afternoon. I expect some of us will carry on afterwards. We usually do. Go to a movie and play a flamenco bar. As we chat, each person says we won't meet up for the next couple of weeks, school holidays. Even those without children are going away, up north, to escape the cold. I order a whiskey. In time, my friends peel away into the evening. Fondly, they take their leave. We will reconvene in 3 weeks' time. Each say they will look forward to it. Each say it is good to have a group of friends. See you on the flip side, the last friend says as he departs. I sit with my whiskey for a while, deliberately take in the incontrovertible truth of my life. My landscape has changed. Now everything stops during the school holidays. Choir, dream group, yoga. Even I pause my own psychotherapy practice, since most people want the break. I am 38, a similar age to my friends. We laugh the same, have work that inspires us the same, but I am no longer the same. They have partners, some have children, I have neither. My friends haven't noticed the change. They are in the river's flow. Now, Sunday gatherings stop during school holidays. Soon they will stop altogether when family life takes on in earnest. I open the door to my bluestone cottage into solid cold. The paint is frozen smooth on the plaster. My shoe leather is hard. It leaks heat from my socks, from my feet. The carpet almost crackles beneath my shoes. The light switch tinkles like icicles on a wire. I turn on the oil heater, pour another whiskey, warm my blood. I ring Mum. She's back in Western Australia where I grew up. No answer, probably out with her new partner. Here in the middle of winter, silence as ever has the last word. I turn on the television, slip into slippers, curl on the satin couch, drape the throw rug over myself and the oil heater to get warm. Everything in my world is in order. I have an uninterrupted weekend to make it so. 2 weeks of unplanned solitude stretch before me to the horizon. Everyone I know and love is engaged in a continuing narrative of domesticity, responsibilities, and obligations. The foundational paragraphs of the life I too set out to get. I watch an American sitcom to kindle my spirit. I weep. That is the last family sitcom I watched for decades. The gates have closed. I am beyond the balance of intimacy and solitude and deep, deep in the territory of she I dare not name. I am spinster. I stand in grief and loneliness, the fractured paragraphs of a discontinued narrative. Grief over what was and is now gone, over what I was convinced would come for me. Wrapped in the isolation of a foreigner, the enormity of my solitude is incomprehensible to others. as far beyond their imagination as it was beyond mine only hours ago. My words are the same, my language wholly different. When I speak of my life, my words are translated as ingratitude for the solitude everyone desires. I'm not ungrateful. I'm ill-equipped and want to talk about it, find a way through it. When I speak of the new landscapes of to my friends and to others, to my therapist, my friends are labelled as, oh, let me just say that again, sorry. When I speak of the new landscape of my friendships to my therapist or to others, my friends are labelled as inadequate, unfaithful, uncommitted to the friendship. Some say I should get better friends, but my friends are not unfaithful or uncommitted. We love each other. They are simply and appropriately otherwise engaged. If I had chosen this life, I would be better prepared, I assume. I'm not sure. I've never heard from another who has lived this whole urban solitude. It would be different if I were a desert anchorite or a cross-legged sadhu sitting with his trident at the mouth of Mother Ganga. There would be rules and rituals to guide me, a scholarship, a community to hold my hand. But the religious life is not my calling. Nor can I say I'm called to urban solitude, but here it is, and here I am, progressing through it with a map or without a map or a community of understanding, walking darkly, one step after the other. Thank you.
Wonderful. I want to ask a little bit about this moment here, and in this essay, you go from that point to later when you're at 65, I think. But in this moment, you're 38. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, something like that. Yes.
Right around 38. And I think for a lot of people, it would be like, well, you still have time. Or blah, blah, blah. I'm sure you heard that a lot. And I'm curious for you, there's another point where you also speak of just really stepping into this moment of, I am alone and I am going, potentially be alone. But what was it at that given moment that was different than before?
I think that was actually the very first time I thought, oh, this could be the way it's going to go. Because, of course, you're surrounded by stories. Everyone automatically assumes that, if they like you, they assume that you're going to find someone who'll love you and you love them and that it'll work out. And at 38, that was the time, certainly the era that I'm talking about as well. There was no reason why I couldn't still have IVF or marry someone who had children or, that it would work. There were 2 years at least left before it started to get really scary for me, but, for anyone. But at that moment, it was just it was just kind of like a flash of, oh gosh, everyone is partnered. I think my father had died and my mother was even in a relationship, but it seemed to be not happening for me. It seemed everybody else could make it happen, and all my friends were certainly in relationships. Whether they had children or not was different. And I think right at that moment, there was quite a lot in popular culture, television shows. I remember there was a show called 30 Something. That I think it was an American show, and that I used to watch a lot. And it was really groundbreaking show where people in relationships with children were struggling with what it was to have an equal relationship between a man and a woman, and what new relationships looked like. And being the kind of person I was, interested in psychotherapy at that time, being a psychotherapist at that time, the conversation was all about coming to know yourself through relationship. And I, was spending a lot of time learning how to do that and waiting for the relationship to come along. So I felt like I'd, done the course, but wasn't getting the job in a way. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but that's how I was at that stage. It wasn't like all over Red Rover. And it wasn't, well, it sounded like reading it sounded like I was slitting my wrists a bit. It gets very cold here in winter. I just want to say that. I know it gets cold there too, but we don't build our houses for the cold here because we're Australian and we think that we have hot weather even here in Melbourne, but we don't. So there are lots of drafts and things. So, you know, it gets very cold, and in the depths of winter, you get that kind of stillness that comes usually just before it snows. It doesn't snow here, but I've lived in places where it does. And there's that stillness, and it's a really kind of, it's like Eliot's still point of the turning world. You know, you've just got that moment where you're confronted with realities, and then the world whirls away. And I started to believe that someone would come along because I am a nice person, or my friends have told me, you know, and all the rest of that story. I feel like I've lost part of your question.
No, I think this is great. You know, one of the things that I thought about so often as I read your story were the people in my life that I know who are uncoupled and don't have children. Mm. And they're in the same way that I think maybe people thought as they read my book about childless people, like, oh, there's a whole backstory here that I don't know, or a story I've put on them. And I think that we tend to put stories on other people kind of all over the place. And you write of this and speak of this kind of what it is that people imagined about you. And I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
And I'm sure other people have had this experience as well. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I learned that because I imagined everybody else's lives. You know, I imagined that everybody understood what my life was until I realized that they're just so busy with their lives that, you know, they're just assuming. Well, and my friends would say, well, we assumed that you were having, you know, dinner with your friends, or, you know, quite a lot of, even my family, when I moved back to Perth to live there for a while, I would go up the hills. I used to live down near the river, and I would go up to the hills where my family lived for Christmas breakfast morning. And I have a number of cousins, all of whom in the afternoon went off to their partners' families and didn't ask me. So I would go home for the rest of Christmas Day. So I was home by lunchtime, doing whatever I chose to do. And sometimes I lucked out with a friend who might invite me over. So, you know, those days could be struggling. But I remember when I was talking with my cousins about this, they said, oh, we assumed that you had Christmas lunch with friends, so we didn't invite you. Mm-hmm. And that, you know, that's a kind of light bulb moment there. Another light bulb moment that I had much, much younger, probably around before 38, but certainly when I was working, I used to worry about, this will not come as a surprise to any of you, I used to worry about what I wore to work. Yes. Like I thought I was the only person in the world who did that. And then I just had this moment where I thought, oh, nobody notices what I wear to work because everybody's worried about what they're working. And then what they're wearing to work. And then I extrapolated that to everything and realized that all I need to do in life is be my authentic self and live this life as it is. Not an easy thought to have, because suddenly you're 100% responsible for your own happiness in any given situation, regardless of what we're talking about. But, you know, your own achievements, everything is suddenly your responsibility. Luckily, that came to me fairly early in life. And so I haven't been burdened with worrying about what other people think of me, but it did give me an insight into the fact that everybody is just so absorbed in the bubble of their own life, and rightly so, that if I want them to know about, if I want friends to know about my life and what I need in a friendship, then I do have to bite the bullet and tell them, at the risk of losing that person or having a severe judgment from them. And yeah, so yes.
Yeah, that's such a, I mean, that lesson I think is something, you know, we all we all can learn. I come up against that often, just like, oh yeah, I just have to ask for it. And I'll,
Yes.
and I'll find out if I'm going to get it or not, rather than,
Yeah.
hoping. One of the place is quite a character, both in your book, in terms of the places that you've lived. Australia itself, you have a whole essay titled, I love this, Goddamn Australia, or Australia Goddamn.
Australia Goddamn.
Australia Goddamn. It is such a great essay. I just hope you all buy this book, because there's so many pieces to it that are really compelling. The differences between, where you do some comparisons between America, the United States, and Australia, like just the different perspective on marriage or happiness, which I want to get to. But I want to talk a little bit about choice. And, there are, in a lot of ways, I could have presented my own, or, sort of present my own story as, I'm childless by circumstance, but I also clearly made choices in that process of, I made a decision to stay with Bill, who didn't want to have children, even though I did. So I was weighing these kinds of things. I'm curious for you, if you, that part of your, a lot of your story is, the fact that, I shouldn't say a lot of your story, but part of your story is that the fact that a person that you wanted to spend your life with didn't happen. But I also wonder for you if it was about being very clear about what you wanted and didn't want in terms of a relationship.
Yes, I think that's true. I was very clear, and I was kind of well schooled by feminists and feminism about, about what I wanted. I wanted that 30-something story where I could have a partner to engage with the edges of life. And such a person just simply did not come along. And I, because it was in popular culture, and certainly women were talking about it, and I had friends who were certainly married to, or in relationships with similar kinds of men, and there were men that I met like that, but they fell in love with someone else. It was such a common conversation that I didn't think it was such a big ask of life. Turns out it's a very big ask. And who knows why? We could sit here and talk about that, people do, they write research papers on it. So I think that certainly, yes, I had, I also grew up in a family, my parents loved each other, and I don't know how much they engaged with the equality issue, but they certainly had a very strong capacity to argue the point with each other and make adjustments to their relationship that suited them both. And so I think, I had a really strong model. So no reason why it couldn't happen. It just simply didn't happen. And now when I think about it, I think, yes, it's a big ask. The environment is such that somehow, and I'm going to take the blame, let us women take the blame for this, because we are the mothers of men. And certainly in Australia, we seem to be bringing up boys to be men who aren't really engaging with the cut and thrust of an equal and safe relationship with a woman. So, we've still got a long way to go. So I think, yes, choice, environment. Look, I think if I can also say about choice, we bandy it around all the time as if it's a kind of widget on which or pivot on which we can blame people for the situation in which they are in. And really, as we all know, I'm sure you all know, that life is just more complicated than that. And we can make, there are many women who have chosen to be married, even though they knew they were taking risks. And, that the bloke wasn't going to be up for what they wanted, or They're on the off chance that he might not be violent, or that he might not be an alcoholic, or he might not be a gambler, you know, all of those sorts of things. Women take risks we all take risks when we hook up. That's the risk, the choice that they take. We don't blame them for that. Whereas if I say, oh, well, I chose against unsuitable offers, then I'm blamed for not enjoying the life that I've had as a result of those choices. So I think we use choice so that we don't have to engage with the complexity and the textures of a different kind of life.
And that's one of the things that I really I enjoyed so much about your collection, is that the way that you really examined that in such a deep way, and helped me as a reader really examine, you know, all of that texture. That you know, I certainly know from my own experience that the path to not having children was so complex, and not just, there was no either or there, and yeah. So I really, and it wasn't all happy or sad. That
no,
in the same way that parenting is, or relationships aren't, I think, yeah. There is, I'm just going to dip in here back to something that you said earlier, and Liz Prado has a question for you. She said, I'm struck by how asking for what you want seems so risky, like the possibility of actually losing people's friendship or having them be judgmental. What did happen when you expressed your wants and needs?
Oh, well, during my 30s and 40s, late 30s and 40s, when my friends were generally with very young children, if not about to have children, if I contacted them to catch up over the weekend, I was quite clearly told that I was being needy for wanting to do that, and didn't they understand that you know, they had a life, and apparently I didn't. But you know, one story, I had a really close friend, colleague at work as well, and then she left work, we changed works, but we kept our friendship. And she got married and became pregnant. And I remember her clearly one day sitting on the couch saying to me, and rubbing her belly, saying, I wonder how you're going to cope now that I'm going to have to give all my attention to my child. And I was just amazed that she had not seen who I am. And I didn't say this, I just smiled. But to myself, I was thinking, how come you don't know that I'm doing quite a few things in all the time that I don't spend with you? I've actually, you know, I've got a life, that I'm doing things, and I'm very happy that you're having a child, and I'd like to be involved in that child's life because you're my friend. I did say that part to her, but she then went on and had her baby. She wanted me to be at the birth, and I was willing to do that, and waited for her to give me the information for you know, turning up to the birth, and rang a couple of times and left messages. Never heard from her again for about 5 years. Wow. After which she called me and said, I wonder if you're ready to be friends again. And I was thinking, wow. Yeah. Interesting. So, you know, it kind of goes to that, that moment, the light bulb moment of, you know, it's so hard to imagine another person's life or how they're even perceiving yours. And so, yes, you can lose a friendship, even when you're not even asking for anything other than, you know, a message to do what your friends asked you to do. So, and I don't know why that happened. I could sit back and say, oh, you know, she was unsatisfactory as a person, I guess. I don't know. I don't think she was. We were friends for years. So I just think this kind of, because we don't talk about the differences in our lives, that these monsters creep in and they ruin friendships. They undermine and erode friendships once we move into family making.
Yeah.
So that's just one story. There's probably 1,000 more I can think of, but that's just popped into my head today.
You know, I wonder, you mentioned that sort of generationally there is a difference. And I know we have a few younger people here and also people our generation and in between. There's two thoughts that have come to my mind as we've gone along, that it's become, I think, more acceptable to go a longer period of time unpartnered, or to, and certainly the numbers are showing here in the United States of not having children. But also I've been thinking about how social media and texting and digital, all of this, the ability to be in contact has impacted the sense of, well, this is a very muddled question because it has two parts. One is the difference in the generation, which we've touched on, but also just how social media
it changes things.
Change the way you feel in terms of this character that you have so much in your story of silence and solitude.
Yes, yeah. Oh, yes. I was saying a little bit before about how, we're in lockdown here again in Melbourne, and the politics is running rife, and people are hating each other and all the rest of the stuff that that goes on. I've had to really start to rethink my engagement with social media, because it just is not, it's not good for my soul to be constantly aware of the politicking that goes on about what is effectively a life-threatening issue for us all, even though we're having COVID light down here compared to what you've been through in the States. But social media does affect solitude, is what I'm saying, and we have to be vigilant. I'm learning how to be vigilant about it. I almost can't remember pre-social media world. Social media has brought about a kind of ritual of connection for me. Like, I've got times in the day when I go and have a look at social media and manage my social media sites and engage with people I've never met in real life. Well, Jackie and all of you here today are an example of this, the miracle that we have. I have these new connections that a fulsomeness to my life that I never had before. But the solitude, I don't think I would have been able to encounter solitude if I hadn't been pre-social media person, because when solitude's foisted upon you, when the phone doesn't ring and the phone's actually attached to a wall and has no screen, there's silence and there's time and there's deserts and deserts of it, or yards and yards of it, depending on your mood. And I just I loved the fact that I didn't like it at the time, because you never like learning hard lessons, but I loved that I had the opportunity to find out that my moods just change regardless. I can be in the same room for a whole day, pottering around, and I can go through the full spectrum of moods. And that's just what solitude is. Mm-hmm. It's not always, there are some people who argue that solitude's like the positive side of loneliness. I see it as a terrain in which loneliness also exists, and that the art of solitude is to travel that terrain and to know and understand that terrain so that you can follow the path well sighted, well lit, rather than, constantly stumbling over the roots and boulders along the way. So I just don't think, I think social media is going to rob us all of that experience that I had. And it's going to be back to only the adventurers who go out there into the middle of the Antarctic, and have an experience of that. Yeah, Sarah Maitland writes beautifully on. She calls it. It's a book called A Little Book of Silence. Some of you might know about it. It's a beautiful book. It's a wonderful conversation about. She's calling it silence, but I call it solitude. because I think silence is part of solitude, but also there's no place, there's hardly any places on earth where there's silence. Yeah, so I think you're right. I'm kind of lucky. That's a generational thing. I got the chance. Whereas now, if you want solitude, you literally have to unattach yourself to machines.
Yeah, yeah. I really the way that silence became really a character in the story, a being of sorts walking with you, and the sound of silence, the ways that you describe that is just so incredible. I really was quite moved by it. I was also moved by, I'm not going to have you read this because I want to leave space for questions or some discussion here, but by the way that you described being at a moment, it's the essay Wolf Moon, and watching this moon and having the impulse to share it with someone, which, you know, I've certainly had moments like that, but I was thinking about for you in that moment, it was sort of bigger because, you know, this was the bigger part of your life of having, you know, these moments. But it was really, I really enjoyed that essay. And so as hopefully people get your book, they'll find that. I want to do one quick little pivot, and this is a step away from what we've been talking about, but something, and I'm bringing it back to me.
Yeah,
but something I really had to chuckle about was you have an essay called Happiness.
Yes.
And it's near the end of your book. And of course, the title of my book is This Particular Happiness.
Yes.
And discuss in this essay sort of the idea of the imperative, the idea that we have this imperative toward happiness. And of course, mine is a particular happiness, but I want you to talk a little bit about your perception of the difference between Americans and Australians around happiness.
Yes. And I had an encounter with a friend the other day that made me think, oh, fuck, I think I have to rewrite that essay. So sorry, folks, that's a mistake. But I was really when I was branching out and researching for this book, and going into bookshops and trying to find anything that was reasonable to read on the subject. That in itself was a challenge. But what I stumbled across was just all these cheap and nasty books about how to be happy and single, which usually meant get fit and make yourself beautiful and go out and get someone, you know, or play the tuba at midnight. I still didn't understand that one, but that was one of the things that was apparently going to bring somebody happiness. But I did notice this sort of link between it, and Bella DePolo's work actually really, really unraveled it. I didn't find her for a long time, but she does a lot of work on the research around happiness, who's happy, like, and the happiness, wealth and well-being of single or married people. And there's mountains and mountains of research on this. And so I began to read philosophy on this because, of course, Aristotle and Socrates, Plato, they write about this, and the hedonist philosophers write about this, and it's called the philosophy of ethics, and they're talking about living the good life, the happy life. Happiness gets kind of linked in there, and that's what happened. It got hooked in there, and that philosophy ended up in your constitution, that idea of the pursuit of happiness, but the happiness that your founding fathers were talking about was the idea of the good life, the contented life, rather than, I don't even know what we think happiness is. But anyhow, it's one that seems to be located in being coupled with children and pretty much being married in a church with children, although that seems to be shifting a bit from what I'm reading in America. Now, in Australia, we're kind of larrikins, and we were founded on you know, penal colonies, really. And a lot of our original convicts were Scottish and Irish, and this was in New South Wales was an English colony, and so the Scottish and the Irish weren't beholden, if you like, to English marriage law, which was being imposed at that time. Now, the colonists, the governor, etc., were very upset that the Irish and the Scottish weren't getting married, but they were living in de facto relationships. There was a huge ratio of, there was like 6 women to 6 women for every man in our colonies. So women never escaped in a way, but there was plenty of shacking up and childbearing going on, but there wasn't legitimate marriage, and illegitimate marriage and illegitimate children has got kind of a history, an unwritten history here in Australia. And it wasn't until the 1960s and 70s, or 1940s and 50s, that we started to have such focus on marriage and family, and that kind of disintegrated in the 70s, 60s and 70s anyhow. So we haven't got our happiness located so much in getting married and settling down. We do have our happiness located in the idea of being loved and lovable. We do have our happiness located in a sense of freedom to do what we want. And we have our idea of happiness located in having enough money so that the government doesn't bother you too much. So that we don't have to be dependent on the government, because the government never gives you enough, that sort of thing. So that's where we're more larrikins and relaxed and laid back. That's what happiness is, to be able to get into an oil-fueled car and go out into the red desert, and for as long as we like. That's where happiness is located. For me to be able to sit and read a book for as long as I like and not be bothered, that's happiness. Yeah. So that's more the Australian idea, and it is it is the good life idea, I think, rather than an idea of a judgment about what a good life looks like.
Yeah, I like that. I think in the same way that I find, even though it is in the title of my book, I find happiness as difficult to define as I do love.
Yes.
I think there are very fluffy words, and what does that mean? Because it's so individual to everyone. Penny has a question. Your life is clearly rich. Do you still think you would have space for a love to share it with, or have you found peace in your solitude?
I would make space if someone who loved me walked in. I mean, would you reject love? I would welcome that in my life. But I'm not sitting around waiting for it or longing for it, or but I just, I welcome friends into my life and they love me. You make space and time if someone comes in and says, I love you, and you love them back. I mean, that's the thing. It's got to be both ways. So, and my life would be, I guess you could say it'd be the icing on the cake.
One of the
Sorry, who asked that question? Can I see you?
Penny.
Penny, I can't. Oh, okay, I can't see you. Oh, right, Penny Rabbits. Yeah, great. Yeah, hi. Lovely to see you.
And, I just want to say, Anne Richardson said, perhaps happiness is an archetype, so not definable. It's really interesting, Anne, that you say that, because Donna writes, and I mean, a lot of this is an exploration of archetypes, very much so in this. So I think that's a suitable, I really like that response. We have about 10 minutes left to see if people have questions. You can jump in, or comments or experiences. I know that we have, a variety of people who may have experiences that are similar here. Is there anything? I have other questions, so if you don't have anything, I'll jump in. But let's see if there's anyone that has anything.
Jackie, I have something. Just a thought that came to mind when you were talking about generational differences, and I think what's striking me is I'm about to turn 35, and I'm so I think I'm probably in the younger group that you were talking about. And I often talk with friends about my experience of being childless and single. And their response is often, but you're so successful. You've been focusing on your career. You're a tenured professor. You're all these things. And it's never sat very well with me. And it just struck me in listening to this conversation that it seems as though women are often expected to fulfill some kind of socially appropriate role, whether it's being partnered, having a child, or being successful. And what would it mean if I wasn't successful?
Yes, yes. I had exactly the same. I think that goes forever. It struck me that you couldn't just be an ordinary person. We're not allowed to be ordinary people who might be a little unhappy, mind you. We're just not allowed to be that. Even mothers with children are expected to be happy, and they're expected to be good mothers, and and they're blamed if they're not. And we women are expected to be, and also married women with children and maybe grandchildren, etc., are also expected to have a successful career. We are expected to have a lot and to be a lot. And I have to say, every time I say this, people laugh at me, but I just say, I just wanted an ordinary life, an unremarkable life. Mm-hmm. And people laugh because I've had all this time and I've done some things, and people think that's successful. That's great. I'm glad that they do. I've enjoyed my life, and I do things that are enjoyable, and I struggle, and I'm sad, and I'm everything that being human is, and you should be too. I think what is irksome about that response is that it's a way of silencing the conversation, so that your friend isn't engaging in what it is with your life that is challenging and what you want for your life. They're just, we do it all the time, don't we? We compare and contrast our lives with each other. And so, look, I'm a mother, I'm successful already. You've got a PhD. I haven't been able to do that because I've been having children. So you're more successful than me. So just don't talk about your success. And you're sitting there going, no, I've just got a PhD. That's all I've got. I haven't even begun to get on the ladder to success yet. And that seems like a pretty stiff curve or ladder. Wouldn't mind a friend to talk to about it. But, we seem to distance ourselves from each other with those sorts of statements. So I think perhaps when you hear that, it's the best thing, and maybe I've done this myself, I'd like to think I have, the best thing to do is to remember that that person's not the person to have this conversation with. The conversation that you want to have is one about, how do I live the life that I have at hand, and have a sense of fulfillment and achievement about it on my terms, not on the world's terms. Yeah. Good luck with it. Yeah.
Thank you, Dawn.
There's a question from Susie. What do you hope partnered people take away from your book?
I hope they take away what they need to respond to Rana in the right way, in a helpful way. That's what I hope. Yeah. I hope that they have an insight that they're able to. Well, I've had this experience, actually. People have come up and said, I now understand what you're talking about. I had no idea that that's what was going on while, I was having children, et cetera, et cetera. These things, I've had moments where my partnered friends have repeated parts of the book back to me saying, oh, I guess you've been living at the edges of our life rather than us being engaged in yours. Yes, that's true. So I've been getting lots of things back, thank you. And I even, this is the best moment of my entire life, I have to say, was I was sitting at the desk minding my own business and the phone rang, and it was someone I didn't know, but I picked it up. I don't know why. And it was a man on the other end of the phone who was married with children. He said, "Oh, I'm surprised that you even picked up." And I said, "Well, me too." And he said, "I've just put your book down and I had to ring you. It's changed my life. I think you've contributed to Australian literary culture here." And he said, "My wife and I have just loved every minute of this book. It's given us great insight into our friends around us and even members of our family, and it's changed us." So, you know, that's what I hope couples, everyone has, actually.
Yeah. I think that's so, you know, in writing a book, what you hope for is that it, you know, I mean, at least you know, that you feel like you have changed or given someone a new light on someone else's experience, not just you, but to go out into the world and be curious in that way. So yeah. Let's see here. Did I ask this one? What advice do you have, Julia? What advice do you have for solo childless women trying to navigate this life in 3 minutes?
Okay, I suggest that you read the book. But what advice do I have a childless single woman to navigate this life? Look, I think know that other people have been there before you, and that there is now a body of literature, and there are, thanks to the internet, incredible number of groups that you can join, blogs, podcasts, all sorts of people talking about this life. I've written one version of it. Many people have written other versions of it. We've got another Australian comedian, Judith Lucy. You can check out the video that we did, similar for a bookshop. Judith Lucy, her name, is a comedian. We actually went to school at the same school, didn't know that. She has written about her experiences of being single, very different story to mine, and she's in her 50s, mid-50s now. But I just think there is an incredible wealth of observation, contemplation and information that is now around that wasn't around when I was that day at the cafe. There was nothing except books telling me how to be happy and single and basically go out and get a partner at any price. So I think that, and I also think, you know, really for everyone, we have been given the opportunity to be a conscious being on the planet for roughly 70 odd years. It's not very long. So it doesn't matter whether you couple and have children or spend all your life doing cartwheels. It seriously doesn't matter. What's important is that you grab every moment, seize the day and live it, because it'll be over before you can say Jack Robinson. So I guess that's what I'd say.
Wow, that's a really nice place to land. There's a lot more conversation that could be had, and I just really appreciate what that you wrote the book and shared it with the world. And I look forward to hopefully having some conversation with some of the people in my life. And I just want to give a shout out to Sue Lick, who is also part of our No Mo Crohn's. Group. So thank you, Donna. This is really a wonderful
Thank you.
And thank you, Michael and Annie Blooms.
Thanks to the both of you.
Thank you, Michael. Yes.
I'll pop the link one more time into the chat where you can buy both of these books. They're great. Would really appreciate it.
And you can find Donna at donnawardwriter.com. Is that right?
Oh, no, it's just donna-ward.com.au.
Okay.
That's your Twitter handle.
If you put the title of my book in, you'll be able to get there. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can find me at JackieShannonHollis.com. It's just been really wonderful. Thank you all for taking your time today, tonight, tomorrow.
Wherever you
are. Thank you everyone for being here. It's been a delight.
Thank you, everyone. And this is being recorded. It's going to be up on our YouTube channel probably sometime tomorrow. So you can share that with other folks or go and watch it again, whatever you like. Thanks. Have a good night, everyone.
Trixie.
Bye.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao. Ciao.
Thank you.